Hey guys, I've been solo queuing a lot of top tier recently, and I've discovered an interesting new strategy which has proven extremely effective, especially in this plane, the SU-30SM2. It's yielded a KDR of roughly 12 to 1 in my recent sessions, now that I've sussed it out, and I'd like to share it with you so that you can do the same thing. Because one thing about this strat is that when more people do it, it becomes more effective. Perhaps we can even change the meta of War Thunder. Basically, if you've played Jets, you know that everyone goes left out of spawn. And the reason for this is that at top tier, everyone is trying to bait their teammates. Players are trying to go more to the left, away from the enemy team, because if they go to center map, they get 20 missiles fired at them from different directions. Well, I've discovered that there's actually another way. You just go right. The objective is to flank to the right of the enemy blob in such a way that they will be caught in between missiles fired by you and your team, making it very difficult for them to notch. So for once, we're actually going to be flanking in the flanker, which is kind of funny. Anyway, I'll be narrating some high kill games to explain my process. These high kill games are actually relatively common with this strategy. Quite often the entire enemy team runs into your missiles because they don't expect anyone to be on the right, even when you tell them that you're coming from the right. In this particular game, I don't think I had a single missile fired at me in this opening sequence because nobody noticed that I went on the right. And this is like 1/4 of all games that I play using this strategy. Sometimes nobody notices that you go there. And in other games, you get, let's say, 2 or 3 enemy players who are really obsessively focused on you, and you can see them change their vector on your radar and turn towards you, and some of them will start hard locking you. You know, they're really kind of obsessed with the idea of killing you because you're sticking out of the blob of your team. You're sticking out, and they want to hammer you down. You seem like a noob, you know, you seem like an easy kill. And very often, those players will walk into your missiles if you just shoot them and then turn into the notch and keep data linking with TWS mode on your radar. Very often, those players who are kind of obsessed on you and tunnel visioning you will not really notice that you're data linking R77-1s into them. And when they do notice, it tends to be too late. This is especially the case because at this opening stage of the game, you've typically built up an enormous amount of speed. You know, I mean, on the SM2, at least, you're typically going to be going like Mach 1.5, Mach 1.6 before you even fire your first missile. And so these missiles have a lot of oomph on them. And R77-1s preserve their energy extremely well in linear flight. They're kind of like delta wing missiles, if that makes sense. They only lose energy when they start turning, and they turn and bleed speed really, really fast. So basically, there isn't as big of a difference as you would think in launching these missiles at 30 kilometers versus 20 kilometers, as long as the target is not maneuvering. And when the enemy team is kind of hard focusing you because you went right, they tend not to be maneuvering. They tend to be heading straight towards you because, you know, they think you're a new player and they're very eager. I actually alt-tab from the game right here because I'm not under any threat, and I'm just data linking an R77 towards this guy. It's going to hit him almost certainly, so I just alt-tab out and look at Twitter for a second. And when I come back in, he's been hit. So, yeah, that's convenient. That's how easy this strategy is sometimes when it works. Like, you hit the enemy team from the right, and you can just feel their cohesion evaporate. Like, whatever plans they had going on, they don't have them anymore after they've had 8 to 12 R77s launched at them from an angle that they didn't expect at an extremely high energy state. And that's what you do with this strategy when it works, you know, when you're able to implement it properly. Now, I'm not going to say that it automatically works every game. You have to work for it. In those games where you are contested by the enemy team, you basically have to do a calculus of seeing who is coming towards you, what jets do they have, you know, what missiles are they going to be equipped with, and you basically think to yourself, what can I get away with in this situation? Like, how close can I get before I start to shoot missiles? For example, if it's a couple of Rafales that have noticed you and are coming towards you, you can get a bit closer. You might only shoot at 20 kilometers because Rafales tend to shoot at close range. Micas are pretty bad outside of, 15 to 20 kilometers. So you might shoot at 20, 25 kilometers against Rafales, and that might ward them off, or they might just walk into it. That happens very often. On the other hand, if there's an F-15E who's up at, 12 kilometers altitude going Mach 1.8, and he's shooting an AMRAAM-C at you, you might have to behave differently. In fact, you might not even notch that AMRAAM. You might wait for it to get close to you, lock it with an R-77-1 on TWS, and then shoot it out of the air so that you don't have to notch, you don't have to lose energy, you don't have to run it out of speed. That's going to take forever on an AMRAAM. You basically just use one missile to get rid of a missile that is blocking you out of the game. And if it's a really long-range launch, you might turn to the side into a notch for a second and start chaffing the guy's TWS so that the missile won't even get into lock range to turn its seeker on. In some games, you might actually turn into a notch just to get off of the radar of people who are scanning you on TWS so that you can be a bit more stealthy, so that you can, deal with a bit less aggression on the right side flank. And that will actually cause people to not go for you surprisingly often. They see you disappear from TWS and they think, oh, that guy's going down into multipath territory. He's not going to do anything this game. I'll just ignore him. And then, you turn back in, and obviously that's not what happens. You're actually able to aggress on their entire team. By the way, sorry if you're hearing a metal noise every now and then. I'm playing with my butterfly knife as I record this, so it's just a bad habit. I keep it at my desk and flip it a lot. But anyway, I'll put it down for now. So this is the next game that I want to show, and it's a very typical specimen of game when you go right. So this is a more recent game. I've kind of refined some of my strategy by here, and I'm at a lower altitude, 8,500 meters I found is good. And I'm really dialing in lately on how to get as close as possible, like ignoring missile warnings until, I can crank at the very last second. And like I said, it's kind of a strategy that's all about learning what you can get away with. And the first, 20, 30, maybe even 50, 100 games that you try this, you might die. You might take a few people with you. You might kill 3-4 people and then turn into a flaming wreck because you overestimated what you're able to do in that situation, and that's totally fine. I think it's completely okay to make mistakes and to figure out what you're able to get away with in this game. In fact, that's the only way that you get better. If you're playing too safe, you're never going to improve. And this is why I tell people not to worry about their stats in War Thunder, because it's just a really bad metric. Like, it doesn't tell you how well you're actually playing. Stats often don't paint the full picture. And just to give an example of that, sometimes when you do this strategy, you'll flank in from the right, everything will go properly, except your missiles don't get the kills. You launch on the entire enemy team basically from a very advantageous position, and they notch in the other direction. They run away from your missiles and they run into your team's missiles. And so you don't even get hardly any kills. And stats-wise, the game would say that you're doing poorly. But the reality is you just won the game single-handedly for your team. So you cannot look at statistics really to get an idea of how you're doing. I mean, it really just gives you a very, very vague, faint idea that is prone to all kinds of issues and biases. So I would never tell anyone to look at their stats to see how they're doing. I would say you should judge yourself as a human and see if you're improving or not. Because that's what really matters in this game, is improving your skills and learning how to handle situations better. And dying and failing is actually part of that. But very often at the end of the game, you'll have used up all your missiles because you had really good launch opportunities and you shot all your Fox 3s. So you're left with R-73s, and you got to kind of, make it work or decide if you want to RTB and get more R77-1s. In this case, I decided to fight with my R73s because there aren't that many enemies alive. Unfortunately, one of them decloaks roughly 4 kilometers to my left, and I'm able to notch his missiles. I was kind of pre-notched already, and I narrowly dodge his cannons. Now, he enters this fight going really fast, and I go upwards. I was already going a bit slower than him, and I start cranking hard, and now I'm behind him. I didn't even really need to use AOA mode. I can just slot in behind him and slowly drift over. I don't want to start going too fast, but I also don't want to fall out of the air. My R73 didn't track because there was a cloud, but radar gun sight will let me line up this kill pretty easily. It is useful when enemies aren't maneuvering erratically. I don't like to over-rely on it, but it can be good here and there. And so that J10, he really would have needed to slow down a lot more if he wanted to win that dogfight. The J10 is a good dogfighting plane, but not at high speed. It's not a Eurofighter. So I basically had my engines off here because I thought he might shoot a PL-5 at me, which is an infrared missile, and he did. His wreck started spewing some PL-5s, and luckily I was far enough away that they had no energy by the time they got to me. So guys, I have plans for a lot of new videos soon, with a particular focus on thrust vectoring fighters. One will be about unorthodox ways to survive against missiles. One is going to be about how to optimally dogfight in the SU-30SM2, how to best use its thrust vectoring, etc. One will be a video concerning the upcoming thrust vectoring fighters that Gaijin plans to add to the game, their flight models and armaments, etc. And I will also be uploading more long-form games with commentary on how to optimally go right and flank in the flanker. If any of that interests you, feel free to follow the channel. My channels are unmonetized, and that will never change, because I think YouTube was way better before money was involved. And yeah, till next time, bye-bye.